don't want to be dependent on Saudi oil or any Middle Eastern oil, but we need the Saudis to be in the pro-American, pro-Israel camp. We need them to be part of a regional alliance against the Iran nuclear threat. God forbid we have to go to war with Iran. We want the Saudis close. We don't want to drive them into the arms of the Russians and the Chinese. How realistic is it that a peace and normalization treaty between Saudi Arabia and Israel could happen at all, much less by the end of the year or early next? Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg with the Rosenberg Report from Jerusalem. And that question is increasingly on the minds of US, Saudi, Israeli, Palestinian, and other diplomats, journalists. And it's fascinating how the tempo of conversation on this topic has increased significantly this year and particularly this summer. And I wanted to give you an update. As you know, I've had the blessing of being able to travel twice into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, taking 2 evangelical delegations in to meet with Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. I spent 2 hours with him the first time, 2 hours with him the second time, and I've continued to engage senior Saudi leaders and officials since those trips just a few years ago. Also talking directly with senior US officials, Israeli officials, analysts, journalists, senators, trying to understand how serious is this. And I have to tell you, I find myself increasingly optimistic that there will actually be a deal. Why do I say that? Look, there's no question that there are plenty of obstacles, and we could talk about some of those, but the critical issue, as I see it, I believe that all 3 leaders, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and now US President Joe Biden, all want this deal to get done. Okay? It used to be that Netanyahu wanted the deal, but no one was quite sure if Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, did he really want to make peace with Israel, or was that something way down the line? I think there are increasing signals coming out of Riyadh that MBS really does want this deal to happen. I interviewed for All Israel News a few weeks back over the summer, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. He had come straight from meeting with MBS in Saudi Arabia here to Israel to meet Netanyahu, and I interviewed him exclusively for All Israel News, and he told me directly, MBS says he's ready to normalize with Israel, but he needs to normalize with Biden first. The relationship is so strained between Joe Biden and the Saudi leadership that MBS doesn't feel like he can make peace with Israel unless this relationship warms and gets so much better with Washington and particularly with President Biden and his administration. That was a dramatic development. And Senator Lindsey Graham was not the only one that's told me that. Other people who have met directly with MBS have told me the exact same thing, and I've been reporting this at All Israel News. So what does this tell us? Netanyahu definitely wants to make peace, okay? Now we know directly that MBS wants a deal. The problem has actually been that President Biden has been saying, I think, offensive things about the Saudis and particularly about MBS. That's why MBS feels there's such a strain and that he can't possibly make a deal with the Israelis if his relationship with Washington and the Biden administration and the president in particular is so bad and so broken and so strained. That led me to think, well, wow, the old version was thinking that Washington might have to persuade MBS to make a deal with Netanyahu. Netanyahu ran his campaign late last year saying that one of his top priorities is making peace with Saudi Arabia. We know that he secretly met, Netanyahu did, with MBS in the fall of 2020. There were no pictures of that meeting, but we know that he and his intelligence chief, the Mossad chief at that time, met with MBS and then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So we know Netanyahu wants this very, very badly, because he thinks it's super important for Israel's security and prosperity, and that if an Israeli-Saudi normalization deal could get done, a deal that's really good for both countries, he believes that's the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict as we've known it. That this is going to open the door for many other Arab Muslim countries, Arab or Muslim countries, to make normalization deals with Israel also. That could include, Qatar, although I'd be a little skeptical of Qatar at this point, but it could include other countries like Indonesia. We'll see. Netanyahu wants it. MBS wants it. The question has always been, does Biden want it? Or does Biden just want to keep criticizing and lambasting the Saudis and MBS? But there's been a significant change. I began writing about this in January of 2023, and we've been covering this at All Israel News, All Arab News, a little bit on the Rosenberg Report. But I wanted to do this exclusive YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report on this topic because the evidence is so clear now that Biden has changed his tune. He keeps sending senior White House officials and State Department, National Security Council officials to meet with the Saudis. Actually, as I record this, the number 2 guy in the Palestinian Authority, a man named Hussein al-Sheikh, who invited me to meet with him in Ramallah just a few months ago, really fascinating and moderate leader within the Palestinian Authority. He's in Riyadh right now, meeting with Brett McGurk, one of the top Middle East experts that's working for Biden to try to help him shape his policy. Why? Because by all evidences, the Biden administration not only is trying to figure out how to craft this deal between the Saudis and Israelis, but also craft a deal that will help the Palestinians feel like their interests are encouraged. The reporting is that Biden's team is saying to the Palestinians, look, you're not going to get everything you want. Don't overreach here. But what do you need that maybe a Saudi-Israeli deal could have as somehow a part of that makes life for Palestinians better, that makes things calmer between Palestinians and Israelis? Now that's a heavy lift right there. It's also a little bit of a heavy lift what the Saudis want from the Americans. They want to be out of the doghouse, that's for sure. They also want a major non-NATO ally status where they're really treated in writing as a major American ally, not a pariah, not as a problem, not as as a pariah. That's the word that Biden kept using during the campaign in 2020 and used early in his administration. But he has changed his tune. Biden now seems like he actually wants this deal to happen. But there are some other obstacles. The Saudis want a lot of high-tech American weaponry to defend themselves against possible Iranian attacks. They want missile defenses. They also want a civilian nuclear industry. They want to be able to create nuclear power, peaceful power, but they want the American technology and they want the American blessing. Now, you might say, why would Israel or anybody who loves Israel be supportive of Saudi Arabia getting nuclear power? Well, there's 2 different ways to look at that. First way to look at it is to how the United Arab Emirates did it. Very quickly, the UAE, the original country in the Abraham Accords deal that made peace with Israel, they asked for a civilian, peaceful nuclear power program. Not a nuclear weapons program like Iran wants, but an actual civilian nuclear power program. Why? Because they realized that the age of petroleum is coming to an end. And both the UAE, Bahrain, but also Saudi Arabia and other countries are thinking, how do we get ready for an age of cleaner power without it being based on petroleum? And civilian nuclear power, done safely, would be the way, or one of the ways, okay? Now, you probably didn't even hear about the UAE wanting this. Why? Because it wasn't controversial. And like, what are you talking about? A Middle Eastern Arab Muslim country that wants a nuclear program? I thought that would be super controversial. Not the way the UAE did it. They said, come and help us, we'll pay for it, but will the Americans come and help us build that technology, but you can provide us uranium fuel to run the power plant, and then you take the spent fuel rods back home so we don't have it, because it's spent fuel rods, uranium fuel rods, that allows a country, if they want, and they create the technology, to enrich that uranium up to military bomb grade quality. That's what the Iranians are doing. But the UAEs are like, we don't want nuclear bombs, we just want the power, and so you guys bring in the nuclear fuel, and when it's been used, you can take it back and give us new fuel, and we don't. That was so obviously a good idea, and so non-controversial, it passed, and that's what's happening in the UAE. If the Saudis are willing to do that, I don't think there's any problem. But what the Saudis are saying is, we really want the right to enrich uranium also. Saudis have large stores of uranium. They have actual reserves in their country. Now, they're not saying they want to enrich it up to nuclear bomb grade quality like the Iranians are doing. They just want to enrich it to the point that you could use it for fuel. But that's what's controversial. Would Israel be supportive of that? I'm not sure that I would, but I want this deal to happen, but I'm not sure I'm happy if other countries get nuclear uranium or plutonium enrichment capabilities. But these are some of the issues that the Biden team is focused on, but they're focused. And I think it's important that you hear that. Look, you know that I don't agree with President Biden on almost anything, not on his pro-abortion position or his LGBTQ position or his refusal to invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House. I think that's wrong. But this is actually something that would be useful. If Biden could be the one to broker this deal, or to reverse it, Netanyahu could be the one to bring the Saudis and Biden together and sort of be the marriage counselor between these two, that would be good. It would be good for the Saudis and Washington to have a healthy alliance, because we need the Saudis. Yes, America should be drilling more oil, and we don't want to be dependent on Saudi oil or any Middle Eastern oil, but we need the Saudis to be in the pro-American, pro-Israel camp. We need them to be part of a regional alliance against the Iran nuclear threat. God forbid we have to go to war with Iran. We want the Saudis close. We don't want to drive them into the arms of the Russians and the Chinese. Last point, I think that if Biden doesn't get this deal done, and if a Republican wins the White House in 2024, that a Republican could probably get this deal done. But there is an incentive, I think, and I want you to think about this and pray about it. There's an incentive, I think, to the Saudis, as well as to the Israelis, that a Democratic president brokers this Saudi-Israeli normalization deal rather than a Republican. I'm not trying to make a partisan point. What I'm saying is, I don't want Israel to be a partisan issue in Washington. And you know how anti-Israel elements of the Democratic Party are becoming. Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Squad, it's a problem. It doesn't mean it's all of the Democratic Party, but it's some significant elements. We need bipartisan effort. We need Democrats to be taking the lead on helping Israel. And in this case, I think it would be in the Saudi best interest, as well as Israeli, that a Democratic president sort of put his blessing on and get credit for this type of major Saudi-Israeli normalization deal. It will be a big deal if it happens. Can it happen? I think it can, right? One Middle East analyst I heard described it as a Rubik's Cube. You're trying to get every side aligned, and that's not easy. But it is possible. And I close with this point. I believe that it's more possible than ever. I'm increasingly, cautiously, but increasingly optimistic that this deal can get done by the end of this year or early next, before we get into the full-blown 2024 election cycle. Why? Because all three leaders want this: Biden, MBS, and Netanyahu. We need to continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This would be a huge advancement in the peace of Jerusalem and all the region. So let's be praying for a Saudi-Israeli deal on good terms that are healthy for all three countries, including the United States. This is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem. We're going to keep watching this at All Israel News, All Arab News, and on the Rosenberg Report. But with a YouTube exclusive, I want to share this with you from the Rosenberg Report studios at TBN right here in Jerusalem. God bless you.